Hello, everyone. Welcome to 15 Minutes of Fame. This is Al Gilbert, Chief Listening Officer of AdvisoryOptions.net. We provide second opinions and new ideas to help workers find new jobs, businesses attract more clients, and sales professionals create presentations that an audience will actually listen to. I love listening to people I find interesting, and for the next 15 minutes, my guest is Ms. Kerri Murray, President of ShelterBox. Show a small picture here. Here we go. Besides the one that you got. Okay. And ShelterBox is a humanitarian aid organization that believes that shelter is a human right, and they send emergency shelter and supplies to natural disaster areas and conflict zones in the form of literally shelter boxes that you can see on screen. So welcome, Kerri.
Thank you so much, Al. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. I want you to talk about ShelterBox, of course. I have some questions to that, but I want to just start with the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what did your parents do for professions?
Oh, well, I grew up in Connecticut, and I grew up on a little Christmas tree farm in Middlebury, Connecticut, a teeny tiny town. And my parents owned a small business. Actually, they still do. And it's a tiny little home store. And I grew up working at the shop, and my dad also managed a flea market on the weekends. So my first job was working at the flea market and also working at our little tree farm. I think the first hourly wage I made was shoveling manure around the trees.
All right. Well, you're used to hard work, and you're used to talking to a lot of people then.
Yes.
You went to Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island, right?
I did, yes.
Graduated in 95. Was GlaxoSmithKline your first job out of college?
No, I actually started working. I worked all through college, work-study jobs, and I actually had my first real paying job with a salary when I was a senior in college. I was a political science major, and I became a lobbyist for an environmental organization called Save the Bay. And it was all about saving Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island. And so I worked all through college in working for the public defender's office. I worked in the Rhode Island State House. I worked on a congressional campaign, and I became a lobbyist. And I did that to really help me pay off my student loans. And after that, I had a short-term job at a technology company. That was where I found GlaxoSmithKline, and SmithKline Beecham at the time recruited me to come work for them.
Okay, well, so your political science major, which was mine as well, you used well as a lobbyist then.
Yes.
So you got this GlaxoSmithKline in '97. You spent 13 years there, and then you went to Direct Relief. Now, Direct Relief started as the William Zimden Foundation in 1948. Established itself in Santa Barbara. And then in 1962, Direct Relief became a licensed wholesale pharmacy to secure prescription medicines to use abroad. Is that how you got connected, being with GlaxoSmithKline?
You know, it was a really interesting situation. We were going through the financial crisis, as you know, and during that time, we had a new CEO at GSK, and he really wanted to work to change the reputation of our industry, starting with our company. And he sent a handful of executives on service assignments for 6 months. And he sent me out to Direct Relief, really to help that organization that was at the time struggling financially. And, you know, he said, you know, the thing about nonprofit organizations is that they often lack business skills. And he wanted to embed us in nonprofits to really teach them and bring basic skills around business, around fundraising, around marketing, communications. And so I joined that organization in late 2009 for what I thought would be 6 months. And in January 2010, a massive earthquake devastated Haiti. And I soon found myself leveraging everything I ever learned in my corporate life and applying it to this nonprofit that actually had been working in Haiti for over 4 decades. And one, it worked. We raised a lot of awareness and a lot of financial support, and we helped a lot of people. So if you remember back to the Haiti earthquake, 1.5 million people lost their homes in an instant, 250,000 people killed. Port-au-Prince was rubble. And actually, it was there that I found ShelterBox, because the first aid organization I found on the ground was ShelterBox. There were green boxes and these white tents everywhere.
Mhm.
But anyway, long story short, my 6 months has turned into the rest of my life. I had really a significant reflection after coming back from working in Haiti about how I could best leverage my skills. And I really thought long and hard about, do I want to continue to climb the corporate ladder? Or could I actually make a bigger difference in the world? Instead of building billion-dollar drugs, can I help these nonprofits that really are life-saving in the communities that they're working around the world? And so I got off the corporate ladder and I joined Direct Relief for what was 5 years there.
Well, then you just answered my next question, was that how did you move from private sector to philanthropy? And I was going to ask you if you had an epiphany, and it sounds like you did.
Did.
Yeah. So tell us a brief history of ShelterBox. Where did it start? Who started it? How did the concept start?
Sure. So ShelterBox started actually over 20 years ago. This is our 20th anniversary this year. And it was founded in the UK by some Rotarians. Now, if you know about Rotary International, it's one of the oldest service organizations in the world.
Mhm.
There are, I think in the US, there are about 7,500 clubs here, but Rotarians are people of action and they're all about service. So what was happening at that time in the world is that there was a large earthquake that devastated Pakistan. And our founders created the first ShelterBox, and they were just Rotarians. And they said, we can do something. We're aid organizations that are bringing in food and water, but people are dying because they don't have access to just basic shelter after this crisis. So they created the first ShelterBox. And so we were born out of Rotary 20 years ago, obviously. Rotary is still very much involved in what we do. We're the official project partner of Rotary International in emergencies. But we are a separate 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is very clear. It's to really enable the provision of emergency shelter and basic supplies to communities that have lost everything in an instant due to a natural disaster, so an earthquake, a cyclone, typhoon,
Right.
or conflict, violent situation.
And how long would a family live in a shelter like that before they moved on to something else?
Well, in the case of, I mentioned Haiti, I mean, I think many families there lived in the ShelterBox tent for over a year. So it's usually a series of months, but sometimes it's longer. We have a very immediate solution to a really acute problem. It's not supposed to be permanent shelter. This is temporary shelter. And shelter is absolutely the first step in recovery. It enables everything else. It enables you to work again. It enables you to get back to school again. So, but the families are living in these tents for a series of at least several months.
Several months. And after they do find other shelter, what happens to the tents? Are they reused? Are they sent back? Or
so this is a gift to the family, and often the aid gets incorporated into the lives of the beneficiaries. We see that all the time, and it's not just tents. So you see this ShelterBox behind me,
right?
And the real premise of a ShelterBox is, what are the things you need to sustain your life if you lose everything in an instant? And the center of gravity is that tent, is the family emergency tent. But the other things that are included inside the box help you set up household. So stainless steel cooking equipment. Organizations are bringing in food. What are you going to boil water in? What are you going to cook a meal in? Lost power. So there's solar lanterns. You need basic tools to help with the repair and rebuild process. So a whole tool set. You see that there's contamination of the water source in so many disasters. Water purification unit, blankets, ground mats, mosquito net. So one box will serve one family, but oftentimes these aid items, as they move into more permanent housing, the aid items get, I would say, upcycled into life. The cooking sets, the water purification, the blankets. We've even seen with the tents, we deployed many, many tents after Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. And the Philippines is an area that is Typhoon Alley. It's just subject to really awful storms. There's actually what could become a super typhoon heading there now. But I've seen in the Philippines after Typhoon Haiyan, families, when they moved into more permanent housing, they were using the ShelterBox tent to create little shops in their barangay, and they
Huh.
and see little off the patios hanging the little sachets that the items that they were selling in their store. People often even rented these out on the beach to tourists. So creating little businesses, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
very innovative. How many countries of need have you personally traveled to and seen ShelterBox in action?
Oh, wow. Well, our organization to date has responded to 300 disasters and conflict situations in right now it's 107 countries that we've deployed to. I've seen ShelterBox in action in several big catastrophes. Haiti earthquake was the first one that I
Right.
saw in a massive way. They provided about a third of all tented shelter. Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. Here at home, Hurricane Harvey that impacted Houston just a couple of years ago. So I've seen it in several places around the world, but there are some places that we cannot send staff to right now, but we have a really big outreach effort to places like Syria.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about Syria, because I learned through another interview you did that Syria is a country, it's actually your biggest client, I think, in terms of need, but you cannot, your volunteers can't go into Syria, so you bring the items to the border and then hand them over to another party. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. So ShelterBox has been responding to the Syrian refugee crisis since 2012 and helping a lot of internally displaced Syrians within the country. It's the longest piece of our work, and it is a bit different than the ShelterBox you see behind me. We are deploying everything from mattresses, carpets, tents, tarps, water purification to children's clothing, and really helping people who are caught in the worst humanitarian crisis of our generation. We are very much a volunteer-led organization, and we are not sending volunteers in there currently. So yes, we actually procure a lot of aid in Turkey. We ship a lot of aid into Turkey, and our teams take it to the border where our Syrian partners literally risk their lives distributing this aid for us. We very much have adapted our aid package now too with COVID. It's required us to really adapt to make sure that we do no harm in these distributions, but we also provide basic things and resources that people really need right now, in addition to shelter to help them physically distance, things like soap, hygiene supplies, masks, gloves, sanitizers. So we really have a very custom bespoke aid package right now with what's happening with COVID.
Yeah, and since you're relying on partners, and I don't mean to be insensitive in this question, what evidence gives you assurance that these items are getting to the people of need and not ending up in a black market somewhere?
Oh, sure. So we don't just work with any partners. We have trusted long-term partnerships with aid organizations within Syria, for instance. And part of what we do is called monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And map tracking and measuring everything we do is critical to what we do. And if we can't ensure it's going to go directly to the beneficiary, we will not send aid in. And we require everything from survey interviews, studies, videotaped interviews to really validate and verify every family that receives aid from the organization. So we have a very extensive monitoring and evaluation program to ensure that the right people are getting, and the most vulnerable are getting the aid from ShelterBox.
Cool, great. How do you, I hate to use the word compete, but I can't think of another word. How do you compete with other charities for funding and donations? And I'm thinking, when I get, and by the way, my wife and I have been longtime supporters of ShelterBox. But we all get solicitations in the mail, and there are medical ones that we can relate to right away, like cancer and leukemia and some kind of illness. But the ShelterBox concept is a little more distant, maybe in some people's mind. How do you, again, I'll just use the word compete to get funding?
Yeah, there are so many amazing charities. There are millions of charities right out there around the world. And, for some people, they might be concerned about their local hospital, their local animal shelter, their local, I get it. But really, the people that appeal to the work of ShelterBox, I would say, are very altruistic humanitarians who want to help people they will never meet in their lifetime, but whose lives they can transform. And without a doubt, and right now, I think every person on the planet can understand how important their home is to their safety and well-being during COVID. And I think more people than ever before relate to what we do and how important it is that we get people in individual shelters to protect families during this time who are particularly vulnerable to things like COVID-19. And people who are in refugee camps, like in Syria, where there's no hope for a hospital bed if they get very sick with this. So I think it's oftentimes a different type of humanitarian. And I think people recognize that with ShelterBox, shelter is without a doubt one of the most tangible differences you can make in someone's life. And I think we're very focused in what we do. We operate in a very effective and efficient manner. And I think one of the things that has helped us and I don't know if it's competing, but there are millions of nonprofits and there aren't many, maybe 100, maybe a little over 100 every year that get nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. But while our work is very quiet, we don't advertise with direct mail and do the normal kind of tactics that we do outreach. We do very good work. We have received 2 Nobel Peace Prize nominations in 2018 and then in 2019 for our work really help create stability in these situations.
Yeah, I think those 2 nominations in 18 and 19 certainly give you an image of credibility, if nothing else, in addition to what you're already doing. Is there a runner-up prize for that? If you
No, but it was interesting because in 2018 there was an article in the Norwegian press, and it looked at who were the front runners to win the prize, and there were just a few photos, and there was a ShelterBox in one of the photos. So that was pretty neat. That
I don't think I've seen. Maybe I missed it. I don't think I've seen mention of those nominations on your ShelterBox website.
I think they may be on the website, but it's
Okay.
I think people who just to answer your question, I think it's people who really care about helping humanity and want to help people around the world and recognize that there are huge disparities.
Yeah.
And for us, we're really trying to raise visibility around one of the biggest issues plaguing our planet right now, which is this massive displacement of people. There are more people displaced in the world than any time in recorded history. And, it's through war, it's through, climate change that we're seeing, climate related emergencies, it's natural disasters. And so the number is now 104 million people, and that's anticipated to grow to over 200 million.
Yeah, no, it's quite.
Need.
It's quite the important need, and again, that's why my wife and I support it. And I'm going to invite people to go to your website. Is it ShelterBox USA or ShelterBox?
It's shelterboxusa.org.
Okay, and in addition to financial donations, because we're just coming up on the time now, what other ways can people help ShelterBox besides financially? I think you've got ambassadors and volunteers.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
There are so many ways to get involved in this organization. At ShelterBox, there's an ambassador program. We have a ShelterBox response team program. Those people are highly trained civilian volunteers. They travel to the front lines of these crisis situations and they help distribute the aid for the organization. There are Rotary Club liaisons for Rotarians that want to get involved. So there are many, many ways. And so on our website, there's so many ways people can get involved and make a difference. And even sharing our information socially, following us on Facebook and sharing the information.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. I wish I could go on forever, but this is 15 minutes of fame, and I'm happy that you could share it with me. And I encourage everyone to go to shelterbox.org. Kerri, have a great day. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Al.
Okay.